Hi guys, Samantha from Decima Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to create this cute pair of earrings. So we're going to be working with two veneers today. We're going to be using this very simple silkscreen veneer, and then we're going to be creating this really interesting mixed media veneer. So because this one's going to take the longest, let's start with that one. So put these to the side. And you're going to need a sheet of white polymer clay that has been rolled out to about, I'd say about 2 millimeters thick. I'm using the third thickest setting on my pasta machine. All we want to do is we want to take this and we want to quickly cut away our excess. Okay, and since we're doing that, I might as well bring over the cutter that we are going to be using for our earring today, and that is this fan shape. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have enough space for two of them, but I don't, because I'm not going to be making more than that, I don't want to have too much excess clay. So I'm going to just see here, if I put that there, there should be enough space for both of them if I do that. So I'm going to just trim away that, since I don't want any excess, because I don't want to really waste clay. So that will be enough for us to work with. Okay, so the first step is going to be to grab some alcohol inks, and I'm going to be using the Pinata alcohol inks because they have a very vibrant colour range, and I'm using Sapphire Blue, Passion Purple, and this Baja Blue. Then I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol, and I'm using 99% alcohol. It's not absolutely necessary, but the higher the concentration of alcohol, the more cracks you're going to receive when you run the veneer through, and you can see here that we do have a few decent cracks. So I've just sprayed it once, and I'm wiping away the excess so it doesn't bleed under. And I'm going to start with the lightest blue. Going to drop that on like so. Then I'll move down to the next blue, which is the sapphire. Drop that in. You want a decent amount of alcohol ink on here. Also, another reason why I wiped up the sides is so that the alcohol ink doesn't accidentally spill down onto the sides, so that it just stays on our piece. Okay, so that's a fairly decent amount of alcohol ink. Now I'm going to bring over just a rubber tool, just so that I can move it around, and you can use a brush, but a brush soaks up the alcohol ink and I don't really want that to happen, so I'm going to just be using a rubber tool to just coax it into moving around like so. And you can see that purple is a very strong colour. And by spraying the isopropyl alcohol ink on beforehand, we are just making it easier for the ink to move around. There we go. Right, now just quickly dry that off. And I'm just going to blow on the surface to get it to kind of blend together. Then I'm just going to grab a wet wipe, and I'm just going to pop that onto the surface, and I don't want to use my fingers, so I'm just going to pop this down, and that it's just going to soak up excess ink. And I'm not going to take it off because this is very wet with alcohol ink now, but I want the clay to sit with this, and I want it to soak up this ink. So just leave this for like half a minute just to make sure that alcohol ink sinks in, and then when that is done we can move on to starting to create our pattern. Okay, there we go. Give it a quick dry. You want it to be completely dry before you put your stencil on, because if you put the stencil on before it has completed drying, you'll find that the clay sticks to the stencil, and when you lift it up you'll get tears, which is something I don't really want. So I just dry by blowing for the most part, and then you can come in and just quickly dab it with your wet wipe just to remove any excess ink that might be not drying. Okay, and I should be able to run my finger over and get very little excess on my finger. Okay, then I will pick that up and I'm going to clean the tile. There we go. So here is what we're left with, and it's kind of this blotchy, mostly very dark pattern. This one up there. I'm just trying to get this part over here dry. There we go. So I can pop that down, stick it down, and you can see it's having very little effect on my fingers, which is what we want. It needs to be nice and dry, and that is mostly achieved by this fact that we sprayed the isopropyl alcohol on. And if I were to stretch this now, you would find that it would crack a bit. Now I'm going to bring over my stencil of choice, and I think I'm going to use this large one here. I'm just going to place that down just about in the middle. Then bring over a piece of plain printing paper, and we're just going to burnish this into place, and it needs to be burnished well because we don't want anything sneaking under our stencil, so burnish this well. And this is why I bring over the plain piece of printing paper, because it means that you can burnish with your fingers without it rubbing over the clay and removing stuff. And this is why I didn't want the clay sticky, because we're burnishing the stencil very well into the clay, and if it was still sticky, the stencil would basically stick to the clay, and then you'd end up with tears later on. Okay, and that is pretty well stuck on. If I see any areas that are kind of lightish, I will burnish a little bit more in that area, but essentially that looks to be stuck on pretty well. Alright, so now grab a wet wipe again and put some isopropyl, actually no, put a very light spray of isopropyl alcohol on. A 50% will work for this. I want you to just very gently start running that over the surface, and the goal here is to remove the top layer of clay that has been stained with the ink. And the isopropyl alcohol really helps with that, so I'm just going to spray that again. I'm using a 99%, but a 50% will work. It will just take a bit longer. Okay, just continue scraping. You want that clay to really lighten up. And just continue until you get a nice light colour, and you can spray again whenever you need to. Okay, and there we go. Now I'm just going to lift this up very carefully, and I'll see if that's lighter. Now you can see how it's stuck a little bit, and that's because the isopropyl alcohol did get under our stencil, and that's why I wanted to lift it up and quickly remove that isopropyl alcohol that got under, and to just quickly clean our stencil before we move on to the next step. So just quickly wipe off your stencil. It does not have to be completely clean, you just want to remove the isopropyl alcohol from it, because that will cause the clay to be sticky and you'll just ultimately end up with problems. So let that dry, let your stencil dry, and then place it back over. Okay, now it's dried. I want to lay that back over so that matches. This is a little tricky, but shouldn't be too hard because your stencil should have left raised areas because we burnished it in so nicely. Then grab the paper and you want to burnish that on all over again. And it also, by lifting it up, it also gives you a chance to see how your shadow effect is. The shadow effect being that you have brushed away some of the ink on these areas, and to see whether or not it is easy enough to see that shadow effect. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the burnish. Now we are going to start our decoration process. So I'm going to be using some white and gold paint. And I'm going to start with the white. Just going to, and actually no, I won't start necessarily with the white, I'll just put both of them out. There you go. And I'm going to be using a ball tool to do this. And I'm going to start with the white, and I just dip my ball tool in a little bit, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to create patterns. So I generally create little dots or little lines. And I alternate between gold and white. Okay. And the reason I'm keeping the stencil on right now is because it will help the paint stay on these shadow areas, which is something that I definitely want. Okay, now I'm going to put some gold along here, and I'm actually going to do little gold lines. And the key here is to have very little paint on your ball tool, because you don't want it to seep under the stencil, because it definitely can do that. And some you can have little dots and lines if you wanted to. I'm going to carry on doing this, and then you'll see the entire pattern when I am done. And basically it's completely up to you how you want to embellish the pattern. You can use any colours you want, you can use any pattern you want, it's completely up to you. This is just what I'm going to be doing for this veneer. Okay, there we go. Now something I quickly want to point out is your white clay is going to pick up some of the colour of the alcohol ink. So you can see here this is basically white, but as it dries, especially with the purple, you're going to find that it picks up these kind of pink tones, which is something that I like. However, if you don't like it, you might want to paint this after it is baked, but you're not going to get the same effect. So I just wanted to let you know, because your paint is not going to remain the same colour the entire time. Okay, and you can see that this picked up our paint over here, which is not something that I wanted. So I'm going to just quickly recolor those areas. If that happens, you have two options. You can either put your stencil back down, or you can just go in, if you're confident enough, and just pop it in. Just being very careful not to go outside those lines. Okay, there we go. Fairly simple. If that happens, don't worry, you can easily just colour that back in. Alright, now I want this to completely dry before we mess with it, so we're going to move on to creating our silkscreen veneer, and then when we're done we can come back and finish this off. So just put that to the side, and I'm going to grab my rag here, and I'm quickly going to cleanse up because we do not want any paint or ink getting onto our piece. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly use my hand to just wipe away most of that moisture. And I've got a piece of white clay that was rolled out on the same setting as our previous piece of clay. And now we're not going to need too much clay to work with, so I'm going to trim away a fair bit of it. There we go, that should be enough. And you can use any silkscreen that you want. However, I'm going to be using a silkscreen from Tonya's Treasures, and it is this really nice fan pattern, which I'm going to be using. Now before we start, I actually want to spray us with some isopropyl alcohol ink. Oh, not ink, it's just isopropyl alcohol. And any strength will work. And I'm just going to use this to actually clean my white clay. I want to get rid of as much debris as possible. And I'm wondering if this might be a hair in here. gonna see if that is. Yes, it is. Might be wondering, ugh, I've nicked the clay now. That's not a problem. Just quickly clean it up, and then you can just easily bring over a piece of plain printing paper and give it a quick burnish just to smooth that nick out. Like so. I'll actually use my fingers to drag some more clay over to that area, and then again burnish that so that it's no longer there. And then I will give one more wipe, spray and wipe with my isopropyl alcohol just to clean it completely. There we go. Final burnish just to clean up any excess liquid. And then we can bring over our silk screen. Lay that over the surface, and I'm going to burnish it very slightly onto the surface so that it sticks. Okay, and I'm going to be using black paint for this. And all the paint that I use in this tutorial is acrylic. Okay. Just brush that over like so. I'm going to wipe up the excess that is on my scraper, and I'm going to go from the other direction, and I'm just busy cleaning excess paint. Each time wiping up the excess on my scraper. There we go, that looks to be about right. There's just one little spot there. There we go. Alright, then lift that up off of your clay, and I want you, before you actually start the silk screening, I want you to have a water bath ready to pop this into, because you do not want your silk screen clogging up with this paint. There we go. We've got a little bit of leakage around this edge, but for the most part that looks really good. Okay, so I'm going to pick that up now. My silk screen has been cleaned. Pick that up, put that to the side, don't touch it, you need it to dry. Once it's dried, then we can move on to cutting out our pieces. And in the meantime, while we were doing that, this veneer should have completed drying. So what we're going to do is, I've got a piece of black clay here rolled out on my thinnest setting, and I am going to flip it because this is what I want the back side to look like. I'm actually going to bring over a nice clean piece of plain printing paper. There we go. And I'm going to place that on top. Like so. I'm just going to touch it to make sure that this is clean. Not clean. Dry. Then just place this on and give it a very light burnish just to smooth it onto the black. So I am then going to cut away the excess black, because this part over here I'm actually going to be using for our silk screened piece in a minute. Okay. The next step is going to be to run this with our roller. Don't put it through the pasta machine just yet. I'm going to use our roller to very gently get those cracks to start showing. Okay. Okay, and it's starting to show, I'm doing this very slowly. Don't want to rush it. Okay, once it gets it down to a certain thickness, I'm actually going to put it through the pasta machine. So I'm going to bring it over to my pasta machine, thickest setting, and I'm going to roll it through. So I roll it through from this side to this side. I'm going to flip, same setting, and I'm going to roll it through again. I'm going to flip again, roll it through, flip, roll it through again. You can see that starts to coax the lines up. I'm going to take it down one setting, and I'm going to roll it through from this side to this side, as you can see here. I'm going to flip it, roll it through again, same setting, flip it, roll it through again, flip it, roll it through again. And there we go. Beautiful. And we didn't have to take it down too many settings, you essentially just wanted to crack that clay. I have not stretched it very much. Okay, lay that down. And this time we are going to burnish it with the paper just to smooth it out, get rid of any raised areas, and to also give that back a nice smooth finish. There we go. And you can see it's actually more striking than the previous one that I made because I used more isopropyl alcohol ink. Not alcohol ink, just the isopropyl alcohol. The more isopropyl alcohol you use, the drier your clay will get and the more cracks you will end up with in the end. Okay. So I'm going to put that to the side, bring over this, and I'm going to tilt it around to see if the paint's finished drying, which it seems to have. And I'm just going to trim away this top part over here and the sides where it has not silk screened properly. And I am going to try to avoid this spot over here. There we go. Okay, and that looks really quite nice. Now something I want to do very quickly is I want to compare how thick these veneers are to one another. So I'm just going to trim one side of this. Just want to have a look here. You can see this is a touch bit thicker than this one. And so I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll it down on the very, very thinnest setting of my pasta machine. This was on a number 6 setting. Now I'm going to take it down 3 settings to my number 9. There we go. And then I'm going to pop this backing on. Trim away your excess. And that black you can just use again in your next project essentially. And I'm just going to burnish that again so that it is nice and stuck down onto the black. Okay, and then just to make sure that it is the same thickness, I am going to run that through my pasta machine on my thickest setting. Okay, then I'm going to take it down one setting, which is the number 2, and I'm going to roll that through as well. Just a few times to make sure there is the correct thickness. And there we go. So it did stretch it a touch, but not too much. So now both veneers are the exact same thickness, which is important. Now I'm just going to pat that down onto my tile. And I'm going to bring over my fan cutters. And I'm also going to bring over a mini circle cutter. So let me just bring that over. And this is my largest mini circle cutter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it so that I can cut out a fan. Like so. And I'm going to position it on this side, and I'm going to try to get the exact same print. Okay, this up, Now the paint will have made a little bit of a mess along the sides, which is fine. You can actually go back in with your cutter and spin it a bit to remove the paint if you want, because the paint will stretch down and that will remove all of the excess around the edges. And when you have a circle cutter, why not do that? I'll lift those up. And now all of these, you don't have to worry about the back too much, because we are going to be putting some black liquid clay on them just to smooth out the backs later on, so do not worry too much about if the backs are completely clean or not. Just going around these edges just to brush them in a bit. Okay, put those to the side. Now we're going to cut out fans shapes. That fits there. That fits there. Okay. So cutting that one out. Then I'm going to do the same. This one. There we go. Okay, then lift those up. Now I want you to just use your fingers to run along the edges just to brush off that paint that got squished down. Very quick. Like so. Now obviously we will do some sanding later on, but for now we are going to be joining pieces. If you have a look here, you can see it, there's this little moon shape at the bottom here. That is what we're creating. We will be creating in a moment. Bring this over and let's cut out a piece. And it's such a pity to cut up this veneer. I don't like it when I have to cut up my veneers because they look so pretty, but we have to. Okay, and then I might as well use my circle cutter to cut out some pieces here. There we go. And I'll see about showing you a leftover tutorial quickly on how to use up that excess clay there. And when you pick that up, just quickly go around the edges, like so, and put them with your other pieces. Now the reason these edges look dirty is because the clay is dry because of that isopropyl alcohol, and so it will have kind of a crackly look around the edge. So you can come to expect that. So again, you want to run your finger along the edge just to remove any little excess bits and pieces. Very quick, very easy to do. Okay, repeat with that one, and then we can move on to cutting up our pieces and pairing up our edges with them. Okay, so we got this one, and now I apologize if my head gets in the way at any point in time, but what we want to do is we want to position it so that we can cut out our moon shape. So you want it to be nice and even on both sides, and I really need my head to get in the way here. Okay, and so we've got a piece back here that we are going to use, and the best way to measure this by eye is to have a look at the top here. It's very hard to see because the camera's not right over the top. Let me see if I can bring this forward and if you can see that better. I'm not sure if you can see that better, but basically there's a border along here. You want that to be even on both sides, so if one side is jutting out wider than the other, then you have not got it even. It should look symmetrical. Then once you're happy, cut down, and you'll end up with this kind of half moon shape. Okay, lift that up, smooth the edges again, lift up the moon shape. Be careful with that because we need that I actually will just press along these edges like so, just to remove any excess. Okay, put that to the side, and then repeat with all of them. Okay, then when we're done, bring over our special veneer and the little sliver of white silkscreen, the little sliver of the white silkscreen piece essentially. And then I tend to like using the blade to actually coax this into the right position. You can use your fingers as well, but I find that the blade is an extremely helpful tool in that you can use it to pat it up against the edge. Like so. And this is why it was so important that our veneers were both the same thickness. Okay, lift that up, and then you can just pat it on. So. Okay, and then I like to check this to make sure that it is basically the right shape. There we go. Just gonna cut to get rid of any little excess bits and pieces that there might be. And then you basically will repeat with the purple ones, the last purple one, to get this effect. And then repeat with the white ones, attaching the little purple crescent to the bottom of them. Okay, so here we go. Those are these two. And here are these two. Personally, I always tend to prefer these ones, but these ones will also work quite well. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to burnish them and then just give them a recut to make sure that they are the correct shape. So just place one down onto your paper. And give it a very gentle burnish. You do not want to be too aggressive when doing this. You just want to give it a very gentle burnish, like so. And I'm just going to work a little bit around this edge here where the join line is. I'm not going to be smoothing it out completely, but I don't want it to be too apparent. There we go, quite happy with that. Then bring over your cutter again. And just give one final cut just to trim away any debris that might be there. So there's a very small amount of leftovers around the edge of the cutter, so just trim that away. Repeat with all four of them, and then we can bake them. Okay, and so there they are, all ready to go into the oven. So I do prefer these ones over here, but since you have these all ready to go, you might as well make a pair of earrings out of them. What I do think that I might want to do is cut out the center, or you might want to put a little drum in there to bring focus to the center, just so that it doesn't look as plain. But you can mess around with it, see what you like, but I'm basically going to leave them the way they are. But it's completely up to you if you want to even make these. Once they're baked, you cannot use them. If you're not happy with them, you can always just turn them into leftover clay and use them some other time. But anyway, they need to go into the oven for at least 40 minutes at your brand's recommended temperature. I'm using Primo, so they're going to go in at Primo's recommended temperature. Then when they're done, we can move on to fixing up their backs. Okay, so now let me show you what we're going to do with these leftovers. So I'm going to start with this one over here. Firstly, I'm going to get rid of this. I don't really need it. That's going to go into the leftover pot. And I'll also remove these little straggly bits as well. They can go into the leftover pot as well. Okay. I'm just going to trim this edge over here. And I'm going to cut it into strips. Okay, that can go as well. Then I will repeat this one. Get it into the right shape. Quickly trim, and you'll repeat that with the white one as well, then cut that into strips. Then I'm just going to separate those and put them off to the side while I repeat that process with my white leftovers. Okay. Then I will take these strips and then I'm just going to place the white ones down. So. And you're still going to end up with some leftovers, obviously. But that's pretty much expected. Place that down. On to the next one and just continue repeating this process until you've used up all of your strips. Okay. Then just trim up those edges. Right. Then I'm going to put this onto a piece of plain printing paper so that we can burnish it. Because we want all of those pieces to sit together nicely. So then burnish parallel to the stripes. You don't want to be burnishing perpendicular to them. That way you keep them nice and straight. And I want you to be pressing quite hard when you're doing this. And if this goes well, we can use this as a backing for our earrings, or we could create a new pair of earrings with it, whichever one works. Okay, then once you've burnished a bit, you can start doing it perpendicular to the stripes just to get rid of any final seams. Okay, and there we go. Now I am going to, let's see, what do I want to do now? Let's do a bargelle. Lift that up. Put that to the side. I'm just going to cut that edge so it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to just cut these into even strips. The whole way along. Okay, then when we're done with that, I am going to take each of these little strips, grab it, move it to one side, grab the next one, gonna move it up one, so, and just basically create a bargelle. And I'm sure some of you have already seen how to create one of these, but for those of you who haven't, I'm going to continue showing you. Basically goes like that, and then you just repeat going up and down until you have used up all of your strips. Okay. Then once you're done with that, pick it up and we're going to burnish it just to smooth out all of those bumps and lumps. And that's one way you can use your leftovers. Now obviously you're not going to use all of them. You're still going to end up with a pretty large amount of leftovers that can be used to create bead cores. It can be used to create bracelet blanks that you then put veneers over. It can be used to create your own texture stamps. It can be used to create shape templates. Lots of different things. But that's all the things reserved for ugly leftovers that have gone through basically the how to use leftovers to create veneers. Then the leftovers of those leftover veneers can be used in those purposes. Okay, and I want to smooth it over a little bit more, but basically that's what we've got. Okay, I'm going to pick that up I'm going to run this through the pasta machine on my thickest setting. Then I'm going to take it down one, and then I'm going to take it down one more, rolling from the side to the side always. There we go. Okay, and what I'm doing now is I'm basically running it through from this side to this side, then flipping, run it from this side to this side. Okay. Then I'm going to take it down one last setting, and I'm going to repeat, rolling parallel with the lines. Okay, and we can probably use this as our backing, though it needs to be thinner, so I might take it down a little bit more. I wasn't incredibly excited about the Burroughs, so we might as well just create an interesting kind of crackled back for our earrings. So I've stretched it out again. I'm going to start rolling it from this side to this side now as I go down one more setting, just to stretch it out so that we create enough clay for us to work with. Okay, and that should be enough for one earring pair. Okay, so I'll leave this here, and when our earring pair comes out of the oven, we can use this backing, then the other one we will apply a liquid clay backing to. Okay, so let's move this to the side. My pieces have just finished baking. Put that over here and out of the way, and we'll bring it over these. And you can see that there's definitely been a colour shift. Keep in mind when you're working with alcohol inks that it will always appear lighter once it has been baked. And so generally you want your colours to be a little darker than you would actually want them before you bake. So now we're going to be using these ones to create our backing. And so what we're going to do is just going around the edges to see if there's any significant parts that are sticking out. Okay, doesn't seem to be. Okay, and so now I'm going to bring over a touch of translucent liquid clay, and this is just Sculpey liquid clay, and I'm just going to brush a bit onto the back of each of this pair. Don't worry about the other one because we're just going to be applying black liquid clay to that to clean up the back. This one we are actually applying a backing. So depending on what you want, you can either choose to just go the liquid clay backing path, or you can choose to actually put a more colourful backing onto the backs of your earrings. So it depends on how much effort you want to put in and how much time you're willing to spend on each piece. Okay, so let's bring over our little Burroughs here, and I'm just going to flip that over, and I'm going to stick that down, that one, stick that down, then just grab a craft knife, and I'm going to somewhat loosely cut around the edges. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Just repeat that with all of them. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just going to pick that up. And then you'll probably have to lift this up with your blade. Like so. And then we're going to tend to it to make it fit properly. Okay. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the edges with my finger, and I'm just going to very gently press along the edges to get it to press against the already baked edge of my piece, and also to give it a very slight bevel and this will just cause it to stick down onto my piece. It will get rid of any excess that is hanging over the edges, and it will just in general make it one secure piece. Run your fingers along the edge to smooth any imperfections, and then put that to the side. And repeat with your other 3 pieces. Okay, and then for the other pair, I'm going to grab those, and I'm going to be using some black liquid Sculpey, and I'm just going to apply that to the back of our pieces, and that is what will create our backing. So I'm just waiting for it to drip down. And here you can see how these pieces came out. They came out really nicely. So I'll just wait for this to come out. Here we are, we're almost there. I'm just going to put a decent amount on. Just put that on all your pieces. And this is why I put the black backing onto our pieces before we bake them the first time around. So when I use the black liquid Sculpey, I don't have to put on too much to hide something like a white backing. The backing's already pretty much black, you're just hiding all the little imperfections. Then you just want to take that and very carefully brush it around and up to the edges. And that is a very easy way to put on a backing. And the reason I like using the Sculpey liquid clay versus something like maybe the Kato liquid clay as a backing, because it has a nice matte finish. There we go. Then put that to the side with the others, and then finish off all your pieces with the liquid clay. And then when you are done with that, you pop them into the oven for another 40 minutes at your brand's recommended temperature. This time it would be Prima. And then when that's done, we're going to be doing a little bit of sanding just to clean up these edges. And then we can move to assembly. Okay, so now they're all out of the oven, and we are basically ready to start just giving their sides a rough sand. I do not want to sand the fronts or the backs because you'll sand off all of this mixed media that you have applied, and so you only want to be sanding these edges just to get them to a nice appealing smooth finish. So you only really need to use a 400 grit sandpaper. You can go up through the grits if you want to, but in general I don't really find that necessary. You just want it to be nice and smooth. It doesn't have to be glossy, especially since the rest of these pieces are going to stay matte. So all you do is you begin sanding it like so, just sanding down that rough edge. And then you can go back and feel it, and if it's nice and smooth, then you can move on to the next one. And just sand around all of the edges, and when you're done with that, move on to all of the rest. You want to be sanding the circles and the fans. Then when they're done, wash them off so you get rid of any silt created from the sanding. And then after that, dry them off, and then we can actually start assembling them. Okay, so now that they are all sanded and dry, we are ready to start drilling holes. So let's start with these ones. So this one you're going to want to drill right in the middle of this dip shape. And I'm using a push drill. Oops. Makes drilling much easier. Just go through the other side as well. Okay, that's that one. Now we'll move on to this one, and the drill should be located right here. And of course, if you're using a different silk screen, you will want to drill however that pattern best suits it. doing that. I do apologise, I'm going a little too fast. There we go. And just break through and then go through the other side before going through completely, because that will yield you a much neater hole. Okay, and then you will just drill a hole right at the top, and then you will repeat for the other earrings. Okay, so now we've drilled them, we are ready to assemble. So you're going to need 2 somewhat large jump rings and an ear wire. And all we're going to do is we're going to place that in the hole, attach our little circle piece, close that up. And you can see how nicely it sits in that little nook in the fan. And then you can just attach your ear wire. Very easy. Oops. There we go. And there you can see the back looks quite nice. And the front looks really nice. So I'll bring over the others, which I have finished. And here are these ones, and personally I still prefer these ones, which were my original design, but since you have the leftovers and resources to make them, I think these 2 earrings look quite cute as well. And here is the pair that I originally made, just so you can see. And so yeah, that is basically it for this tutorial. It's quite a lot of fun to create. You can obviously make them in different colors if you wanted. Greens, yellows, those would look quite cute together. You can do it in reds and golds, lots of different colors that you could play around with. Also bear in mind that you can play around with different silk screens, you can play around with a different stencil backing, play around with different ways of painting in the pattern. There are again many different ways that you can play around with this technique and design. Different cutters also again will give you a completely different result. So have fun, play around with it, let me know what ideas you have in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.